Reginald here. People keep saying the Thunderhammer is a good and fun weapon. Problem is, you don't like it. Not only that, but they released a new variant of it, and it's got even less to like. Funky swing pattern, weak light attacks, it's slow, it's inflexible, and clunky. Plus, who cares if you can kill like one mutie with it? Anything can do that. And heck, the thing struggles to kill like one Poxwalker. It just throws stuff around, which is annoying and takes a long time to clean up. Who would use this weapon? This guide is for you. This tutorial is primarily going to be about the Ironhelm. Some of the information herein is going to be useful for the Crucius as well, but it's mostly going to be for the lighter of the two hammers and the sort of weirdness that it has comparatively. As an overview, we'll be talking about the role of the weapon in your kit, build recommendations, how to use the different swings, that includes light, heavy, and special attacks, and the light special versus the heavy special. We'll cover some idiosyncrasies with using the weapon, as well as how to use blocks, dodges, and movements when using the weapon. And we'll also talk through some tips and tricks that I've discovered in my many hours swinging the thing. And notably, we'll be talking about weapon pairing considerations. That's a little different than other guides that I've done, and that's because this weapon in particular requires, in my opinion, a little bit more in the domain of weapon pairings. The role of the Thunderhammer in your kit is a little different than most other weapons, in that it actually ascends in value in line with the value of your target. It is kind of not that great against lower value targets, and it is kind of excellent against high value targets. It's essentially a special sniping weapon and an elite sniping weapon. It's good for armor busting and bad for killing large groups of enemies. The main advantage of using a Thunderhammer is that it doesn't require any ammo to do this. It does require you to get close, but you're a zealot, so you're going to do that all game anyway. The key drawback of the Thunderhammer is you have to tolerate not being able to efficiently kill the large volume of low-quality enemies that are often there. And we're going to be addressing how to deal with that problem in this tutorial. Next up, we'll talk build recommendations, because obviously getting the right build to get the most value out of this weapon and its sniping capacity is kind of the key detail. Since, unlike other weapons, you're not really looking to sort of max or like spread out anything, you're really looking to maximize your sniping capacity. We're going to be building the weapon for that. Given that this is a video specifically about the Ironhelm, I'm actually going to make a hard recommendation on how to build it. Unlike the Crucius, the Ironhelm is a little weaker on its special attacks and hits the breakpoints a little less hard. So there are some blessings I strongly recommend and some perks I strongly recommend so that you can have a good time with the weapon while using it. Of course, you can try out deviations on this, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I recommend that you build your Thunderhammer with Slaughterer 3 or better, and with Thrust 3 or better. This will get you over the line on a lot of targets. Additionally, I recommend you pick up plus 25% Maniacs. What that means is you're going to have to use your reroll to get that Maniacs damage. This gets you over the line on quickly and easily killing muties with only like a stack of thrust or something like that, so you can kind of do this quickly. It also makes it easier to kill other targets like trappers, flamers, things like that. Keep in mind that the goal of the Thunderhammer is to kill specials, so you really want to be able to kill the class of specials that's most likely to be in your way, which is Maniac, right? The other thing you can try to do, and good luck here because RNG will be your enemy, is try to get some plus carapace damage. I have found plus carapace to be really fun to use, though I only have, I think, 15% on my Ironhelm. It does get me closer to the line for more quickly killing crushers, and I like that on this weapon. It is not necessary to worry about getting unyielding unless you're really going for big boss damage. Since that's such a niche use case, I don't recommend it, though if you are trying to build your meme cannon, that's certainly the one to pick up is unyielding instead. It'll let you do the big boss damage that you do. It'll let you kill, the demon hosts and stuff like that, and that can be fun, so I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but this guide is for trying to use the weapon all the time in every mission, with the intent of it being fun to use throughout a mission. The final subject in this section is on rolling the stats bars to get a good Ironhelm. Now, unfortunately, RNG is going to be your enemy here once again, and you do need to roll 4 good bars to have a good Ironhelm. You're going to need a good damage stat, preferably above 70, even into the 75s. That's a priority stat for you. You'll want an excellent penetration stat and an excellent first target stat. Most people wouldn't assume so, but the crowd control stat is also quite important, so you'll want a good one of those. Now, the key detail here on the crowd control stat is that it is what gives you faster swing speed. It's not self-evident from the description, so keep that in mind. You want the faster swing speed so that you can actually use the thing without it feeling clunky as all get out, so don't dump on that. You'll need it. Defenses is where you can lose out, since it's mostly affecting your pushes and sprint cost. And you can handle that and mitigate that with your stamina bar if you want. Still, it has great stamina regeneration. I run stamina curios. It's not that big of a deal. The damage, penetration, and first target stat all go together to determine how much damage you actually do. So, if you have a really bad penetration stat, you're going to do poor damage to armor. If you have a really bad first target stat, you're actually just going to do less damage overall, since the first target is the only target you really hit with the hammer. Let's go ahead and get started on some light swings and show you what that can do. Pardon me, I was just getting ready to chastise some heretics. Let's get to that, why don't we? Light attacks are somewhat low value on the Thunderhammer, and especially on the Ironhelm, which has a lower base damage. The main advantage to light attacks is that they're fast, and they don't have a terrible swing pattern. They also have good headshot bonuses, and you can use them in a pinch to stagger something if you need to. With a few stacks of buffs, you can start one-shotting basic low-tier enemies like shooters and bruisers, groaners of course, and infested. They have a little bit of cleave and cleave damage, so you can use them to effectively kind of do the same work you might do with a heavy attack, but the swing patterns aren't as favorable to especially on the Ironhelm, to staggering larger groups of enemies. So I'll just show you what I mean in terms of damage, and then we can just move on, because you're really going to use the light attacks only as a niche use case or as a cleanup for once you've already started killing stuff. Alright, we got a few stacks here. Starting to get close to the headshot limit. That guy dies. That guy dies. That guy dies. They're kind of easy to miss. I find that I do that fairly consistently as well. So just be aware of that fact. But obviously, as you can see, they're not incredible, but they will get you to the point where you can kind of like quickly clean up some light enemies, maybe 6 or 7 dudes you just need to clean up after you've been swinging heavies for a while and you just want to get on with the next part of your mission. They can be used to stagger gunners out of their swings, or out of their shooting. Flamers, same thing. They won't be interrupting any ragers anytime soon, but it's not the worst thing if you need a quick attack to get something in there so that you can then use a heavy attack or make space for a special attack or something like that. Next on the docket, we're going to talk about heavy attacks. We're going to talk about what they're useful for, like what targets they're good at, and we're going to talk about the swing patterns that you're going to use in various situations and how to, get value out of them. I also want to address, just real briefly, the sort of slowness of heavy attacks as well. So we'll actually start there. Heavy attacks are a little slow, and the trick to using heavy attacks is to sort of think of them the way you might think of a baseball swing. You wind up your swing, and then you let go when you think the swing is going to intersect your oncoming target. It's not quite like other attacks where you just click the button to deliver the attack. There's a bit of a delay, and learning the Thunderhammer is about learning to take advantage of the delay to get the target you want to get. Once you figure that out, it's actually quite nice. You can charge up your swing and let it go so that it intersects a jumping dog or a attacking mutie. In fact, my preferred way to handle oncoming dogs, if I don't have Chastise the Wicked available, is to just prepare a swing and let it go as they're oncoming, as if I'm playing a game of baseball with their head. And that actually works very well, and most times you can even kill them outright. So that's a trick for you on understanding the swing. Now let's dig into what kinds of targets they're useful for. Okay, so the key thing that your heavy attacks are going to be used for is pretty much everything. They are your bread and butter attack. They are what you are going to do most of the time you are using the Thunderhammer. They are broken into two types of swings: the horizontal attacks and the overhead attack. The horizontals are your primary horde clear and general target attacks, not just because there's two of them and they're first, but also because they're the most versatile in their swing directions. The overhead is useful, very useful and strong, but it's somewhat controversial because it's mixed into your heavy chain and you can't avoid it if you intend to get back to that first heavy. So we'll be talking about that a little bit more and how to get value out of it, but just know that a lot of people don't like the Ironhelm specifically because, unlike the Crucius, it has that overhead mixed into the heavy chain that's hard to avoid. I will be spending a fair bit of time on that overhead, but first I just want to focus on what the horizontals are useful for and how to use them properly. For heavy swings, the targets you'll be swinging your horizontals into are pretty much any horde enemy, bruisers. You could swing them at elites like the gunners, like dogs in terms of specials, shotgunners. You can anything bigger than that really. You'll still be swinging them. Flamers will work just fine, but you'll still be swinging them, but just be aware that you're mostly going to be knocking things over. Obviously, snipers are weak and we don't worry about them too much, but you won't be knocking any ragers down once they're in their swing pattern, but you can certainly stagger a lot of targets with this, including maulers and crushers. So they get good stagger value against big boys, but against lighter elites, they are actually quite effective against killing them as well. The key thing you need to know, the critical detail, is the Ironhelm is a headshot hitter. You should be swinging for heads all the time. It has good priority on heads. It's easy to do, and horizontals let you hit multiple heads for better damage than you would otherwise. So please keep that in mind while you're swinging. You're always looking to snipe heads with this thing. That goes for any attack, including the special attack. That's where you're going to get the big damage numbers out of, and that's how you're going to make the hammer feel better for you. With Slaughter and Rising Conviction, the horizontals are going to start killing bruiser type enemies really quickly, and you probably, with a decently rolled one, are going to be killing Infested right off the bat. So I just want to show you what that looks like to hit a group of Infested without any stacks built up, and then show you how quickly you can start getting to one-shots. You probably can hit it on the first go. Alright, there you go. See? So you can pretty much kill targets in one hit when it comes to the Ironhelm against infested Poxwalker type enemies. The same thing is true for Groaners, and once you build up enough stacks of Slaughter and Rising Conviction, I have managed to get as many as 2 whole kills in one swing. Quite impressive. Generally speaking, as I mentioned, the Ironhelm heavy swings and special attacks, the Ironhelm as a weapon, goes up in value relative to the value of the target you're hitting. So lower value targets, you're putting a lot of damage on first target, so you're not going to get a lot of value out of things because you're not going to kill much. Killing 1 or 2 guys and they're low value, so who cares? That's kind of the problem with the Thunderhammer. You're going to be mitigating with your weapon selection on your secondary. Alright, let's go ahead and hit a couple of bruiser heads and just show you what that looks like. So we're going to start the flak guys. You can see I don't do any damage to the second target. That is because flak basically if you hit a flak target with this, it protects the next flak guy. Notice I'm managing to do an appreciable amount of damage to these guys. 200 damage on the second target isn't bad once you have some good slaughter stacks up. And that's essentially what you'll be doing for most of these guys with the bruisers. I want to talk about the properties of your heavy swings. The key thing to know is once you get into the flak armor range, they stop dealing any cleave damage at all. It's actually quite remarkable, but I will show you what I mean on these targets here. That is a 1 target hit. Notice I am successfully hitting multiple targets, but no further damage is being dealt. I guess that guy took some little bit. This is important to know because what's going to happen is you run into flak enemies and you're going to want to aim for the non-flak bits, if there are any. Otherwise, you're going to be killing things very slow. Let's show you what I mean. We can multi-tap the heads on these guys, and a good thing too, since the Ironhelm has great headshot bonuses. hit that guy's head, so I hit the other guy for an adequate amount of damage. How about these guys? Well, flakheads, or blackheads as I call them, have flak on their head, which means that if you are swinging headshots against these guys, you will kill them faster, but you will not be doing any cleave damage. Keep that in mind while you're fighting them in a horde. If you need to hit the other guys for any appreciable damage, you might want to just swing a body shot. You're going to knock them over, and you can clean them up later. Alternatively, you can always just swing for heads, and that works just fine. And there you go. This is the problem with heavy attacks in general on the hammer. As you can see, they're kind of low value. Alright, we're going to come back to that group in a second. I want to show you how that looks against infested and groaners. Now, we did manage to cleave into that second group through this one flak guy, and that is because the other guys don't have much in the way of armor. There you go. For groaners, with some slaughterer stacks up, we'll go ahead and do that real quick. Get a couple of those. You can see I can get a kill on the first swing. We'll go ahead and swing through that, and boom, I got one guy and I wounded another. I believe you can get as many as 2 kills or close to it on that heavy swing. It's not incredible. It's certainly going to be where you're getting low value add out of this weapon. It's just a common problem with the Ironhelm and the Crucius, is that against these lighter targets, you are going to be getting not much value swinging against them. Because you have to remember, the Ironhelm is about sniping the big boys. That's where all your value is, and so that goes even for your normal heavy attacks. They're best against elites. Let's do that. That's fine. It's not super fast, but it's fine. Once you get a few stacks of Slaughterer, you can even kill them faster. That goes for shotgunners, whatever. But again, your main value here is staggering them so you can then make space for that charged attack. Or, in the case of the Ironhelm, the overhead. Let's talk about the overhead. Okay, I need to change weapons real quick because patch 9, unfortunately, bugged Thrust, and made it so that it is doing 50% extra damage per stack. That's a bit more than I wanted to show off. I just want to give you a sense of what this thing can do. With Thrust, of course, you can get pretty appreciable damage against Flak and Carapace, and that's in the 700-800 damage range. But even without it, against normal targets, you can do some pretty good damage. That's 651 on a heavy attack. 2 shots to kill Flak guy. Yes, I know I had to do double overheads, but you can essentially do like a heavy, and maybe you'll swing into the horde, and then you'll do another heavy, and boom, done. Alright. How about Carapace? Well, bonk, 400 damage. Not bad. Keep in mind, that's unpowered, and I haven't gotten any stacks of Thrust on this thing, any stack of Slaughterer on this thing. You can get some pretty appreciable numbers. Let's actually show off what Slaughterer would do. Since I can't demo Thrust, we'll just have to kill a couple of these guys real quick. So you can at least have a sense of how much potential damage you can do. And bonk. 789, just Rising Conviction in Slaughterer. Imagine that with Thrust. Probably cresting 1,000 damage. Haven't even charged it up. We'll talk about charged up attacks in a second, but just keep that in mind. It is not at all shabby. Alright, how about doggies? Well, normal heavy attacks can do 1,000 damage against a head on a dog. So when I was talking about those baseball swings, that's what I'm talking about. What about that overhead? 1743. I bet if I had even a little bit of Rising Conviction, I could one-shot that. Just with that overhead. Alright, how about this Fine Flamer? Dead. That's 1,500 damage against Maniacs. That is with plus Maniacs, but come on, tell me that's not nice. You don't even have to spend time charging up. You can just bonk someone's head in the middle of a horde, for example. Maybe you've been swinging away and you just need to quick take something out. There you go. Alright, let's get this guy out of the way, and we'll talk Muty. No stacks of blessings. Overhead to the head of a Maniac. That is not bad. How about with the charge? You can see that overhead slaps way harder than people give it credit for. and that makes it quite handy for some types of targets. How about this guy? Boom. Alright. Any stacks of buffs, any thrust, you can start getting over the line on a lot of stuff. However, unyielding. Now, I don't have any plus unyielding, so keep that in mind as well. So, that's where that big overhead comes in. It can be pulled out, like just imagine a scenario for a second. You're fighting a horde of enemies, and an elite is mixed into that horde of enemies, and you want to deal with that elite without stopping to charge up your power attack. So you swing your first 2 heavy attacks into the horde. You've made yourself some space because they're all on the floor now. Then you charge that nice big overhead up, maybe with some stacks of thrust. You bonk it on the head. That guy's toast. Now you can continue your horde clearing duties. You didn't even have to pause to do a little charge up thing before you got that swing in there. Now with the Ironhelm, of course, you can cleave hordes with those charge attacks. But the point is, you can weave this into your normal flow of combat and deliver a killing blow on the fly. That is sick. Push attacks on the hammer are nothing special. They don't hit a lot of targets for much damage besides the first, much like all hammer attacks, but they deal good damage and will usually kill a first target with buff stacks up on headshot, for any target that's a bruiser or smaller anyway. They deal good stagger as a utility, and a push attack counts as a right to left swing, so it will set your next heavy as a left to right horizontal. I've gone ahead and recorded me attempting to show you what the push attack looks like with full stacks of damage. Unfortunately, one of the immediate problems is when I shove them, they all fall over. So you'll have to just watch me play cleanup for a second as I get different push attacks in there. You can, of course, do this yourself anytime. I just like to try and show you in the video how it works so you know what to expect. Onto the swing patterns for the Ironhelm. There are 3 swing patterns that you need to know about, and one of them that you're going to use most often. We'll start with that one since it's the one you'll be using. The swing pattern is right to left heavy, left to right heavy, and overhead heavy. Repeating forever. Now, this pattern is going to be the one you use on most targets. You'll just have to get used to the fact that the third element in the swing is an overhead. Find something you can hit with it, maybe 1 or 2 guys that you plan to knock over that might be about to hit you or something like that, and just hit them with that. If you suddenly encounter a risk that you cannot deal with any other way, with the overhead or there's too many dudes about to hit you, just use a push and maybe a push attack to make the space you need, or use a dodge. That's the way you're going to use the Ironhelm. It's a little less ideal than the Crucius. It requires a little bit more attention to detail of what's going on around you. You can't just, continue to smash heavy attacks to kill everything around you, albeit slowly. So the upshot of the Ironhelm is that you can use that overhead heavy to kill critical targets. The downside is that in a horde, you're kind of losing a defensive swing in favor of a more offensive one. All right, let's talk about the other 2 swing patterns. So you've got the heavy, heavy, light, heavy, light pattern. You can repeat that heavy to light chain forever. That's essentially intended to be your horde clear pattern. The reason that's your horde clear pattern is because that light attack swing has a little bit more cleave and cleave damage distribution than the heavy attacks. Unfortunately, I don't find that incredibly useful. It's not bad, and there's certainly room to use that. But what I've found is that it's harder to get a kill with every swing when doing this. Even on headshots, I tend to come up just a touch short, even with Slaughterer 4 or Slaughterer 3, and so that little bit of extra cleave damage is fine, and the fact that the swing comes up faster is fine, but it's not quite enough. So you can use it. There's nothing wrong with sneaking in a couple of light swings in the middle of that pattern, since obviously you'll still have good crowd control going on once you have all your stacks built up, and that's great. But you're going to probably be favoring, as I suggested, just the standard heavy swing pattern. The final swing pattern for the Ironhelm is a sort of a special killer. It is heavy 1, light, heavy. That's 2 overheads. It's a light overhead followed by a heavy overhead with a heavy to start off. The light overhead doesn't do that much damage, though it's usually a one-hit KO on bruisers or something like that. You know, you can certainly use it to clear the way with a few buff stacks on killing an elite. Personally, I don't find this combo that much more useful than just making space or time for using a special attack or charging up some thrust on an overhead. So I never do it. I just go ahead and if I know I want to use that overhead, I'm going to just use 2 heavy attacks and then make the overhead happen. I'm not going to worry about like bringing a light in after my heavy attack so that I can get to the light, the overhead heavy in the chain. It's that overhead heavy is buried in the chain and there's no easy way to access it, so I don't worry about using a light to get there slightly faster. I just accept the fact that I'm swinging 2 heavies first. That's how I recommend you play it, essentially, is most of the time just do the heavy chain until you get good with it, and then you know where the heavy overhead is if you want it, so play around your knowledge of where it is in the chain and use it to your advantage. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, the reason you lugged this kind of weak, hilariously incapable, heavy chunk of metal all this way so that you can do this. In this section, I will cover 4 topics: player attention and target priority, heavy versus light special attacks, special attack cleaving behaviors, and lock time. Special attacks are powerful and extremely useful, but they demand something very important from the player: attention. If thou brought the Thunderhammer, then it is thy job, no, thy solemn duty, to kill all the specials. Bear with me while I belabor this point. If you've brought the Thunderhammer, the key value you contribute to the team is infinite ammo killing of special enemies and elites. If you aren't paying attention and aren't killing those targets, then you are basically useless. You should be the first person looking around for, listening for, and dealing with those specials and elites. You should have your head on a swivel and your ears carefully attuned to those spawn sounds. Your job, first and foremost, is to go tackle those problems before anyone else can get to them, and yes, that includes the guy with the gun. You can do it better and faster in most cases than anyone else. This is especially true for muties, which will mostly come to you, and dogs, which will mostly come to you and your friends. So pay attention for those and kill them first. Special attacks come in 2 types, light and heavy. There is no distinction given between the type of swing done and the damage output, aside from whether or not it is a light chain attack or a heavy chain attack. The overhead has no impact on the damage of the special. I kinda don't like that, but it wasn't my decision. Allow me to demonstrate that principle. I will hit this one with a normal heavy attack, and I will hit this one with the overhead. Alright, I just gotta wait for that stack to clear. That is the same number. Same is true for the light attacks. In both cases, you deal 411 damage on light against Carapace's headshot, and you deal, 734 on heavies. It doesn't matter the pattern of the swing, you get the same damage. Alright, let's hit a few targets with the Thunder Hammer. Keep in mind I'm using the one I have without thrust, since thrust is currently broken. I will mention where thrust will get you over the line on specific key targets. Alright, Bulwark in the back. One shot. Reaper in the head. Not quite. Thrust will get you over the line on that one. Doggo, headshot, one hit. Let's try light. Not quite. Gonna need those heavy attacks, but you don't need thrust. How about flamers? Light attack, one shot. How about... well, those guys you can kill with normal heavy attacks, so that's not terribly impressive. The same is true for snipers. In fact, you might even cleave snipers. Oopsies. Guess you hit that after all. Light attack on headshot will definitely kill those. How about body shot? Sure enough, don't even need to hit the head. Trappers. Light attack won't do it. In fact, it only does 500 damage. I don't know who made trappers so tough against melee. Man, are they tanky. Heavy attack will get you over the line. I'm gonna shove this out of the way. Get out of my way. Sorry about that. Okay. Let's hit the mutie in the face. 2947. This is where a lot of people thought the Crucius was better, because the Crucius gets you right to the edge. In fact, with a little thrust, you can get right over it. The thing is, with thrust on your Ironhelm, you need maybe one or two more stacks from a cold start, but you can absolutely get over the edge on a mutie. It's really not that bad. Also, just a point of order, only need about 3 more swings from that as it is. Admittedly, you could probably use heavies and do a little better, or maybe that nice, chunky overhead. After all, you do almost 1200 damage, so keep that in mind. Alright, let's talk about Ragers and Shotgunners. We'll go over there to hit those guys too. We'll just make the full circuit, so this isn't going to be traditional for most things. Not quite. Thrust will take you over the edge. I admittedly have plus 20% flak on this one, but again, thrust will get you over the edge on those guys, and if you don't, you can just follow up with a quick additional attack. Now let's do that wrong, hang on. There we go. Gotta catch the edge of the screen to get that. Alright, heavy attack does it. What about light attack? Headshot is a no. Not him either. There you go. Let's just see how much more I need. I would definitely need at least a little thrust. Okay, let's go hit these last couple of elites over here. Body shot on Black Boy. Definitely no kill. Headshot on Eric. It's the same damage value, but of course he has a lot less health, so it looks more impressive. Heavy shot does not quite do it, even with my plus flat. Same with that guy. Was that a chest shot? No, that's definitely a head. Alright. You can see what you can kill with this, and I've mentioned what'll get you over the line on thrust. Basically anything that's close. Obviously other buff stacks are going to play a role in making that easier, so, you know, if you've got some Slaughterer up or something like that in the middle of a messy fight, that can work to your advantage. Briefly, I'd like to discuss the Ironhelm's cleaving effect when on special attack. After a lot of discussion, and I won't pretend it was any otherwise, me and a number of other forum warriors got it in our heads that the best way to solve for the Crucius's get down Mr. President problem of having Poxwalkers and Groaners jump in front of your Crusher was to give it some cleave on charged attacks. There was also a lot of discussion around the lock time, so both of these changes have been made over time in response to the discussions us forum warriors have had, and I'm one of them, so you can thank me for this, I guess. I don't know how much they paid attention to any of the conversation us losers were having, but suffice it to say, I'm fairly pleased with the outcome of what the Ironhelm behaves like. I think it's a fun weapon as a consequence of these changes. So let me talk about what those are. The Crucius, when you swing it into a enemy, will hit the first enemy and discharge regardless of hit mass. The Ironhelm uses a hit mass calculation to calculate how many enemies it's going to pass through before it deals damage, the big discharge damage to the Crusher or whatever you're hitting. It stops on all elites. Let me demonstrate the cleaving effects of the Ironhelm when hitting through Groaners. We're just going to charge it up and swing. There we go. We were able to cleave through 3 targets and hit the Crusher. Notably, we killed 1 and as a consequence gained a stack of Slaughterer. That's quite advantageous to us. So, this is the big advantage the Ironhelm now has over the Crucius, and it's quite nice. No longer will some Poxwalker yell, "Get down, Mr. President," and jump in the way of your big, chunky swing that you're about to expend all this energy, time, and safety on to get. This will work as well for infested Poxwalkers. I always call them infested for some reason. Don't mind me. It's not what they are. Here we go. Works like a charm. I may have missed a couple there. We'll try and see if I can scooch. See how they were inside? That was one of the problems we always ran into a lot with the Crucius, and still will run into with the Crucius. So this is a huge advantage in favor of the Ironhelm. It gives you a lot more safety when fighting in groups. You can basically charge into something and hit your priority target as long as you kind of aim correctly. We'll discuss that aim in a little while. Lastly, I want to discuss lock time. This was another change that was made after a lot of feedback on the Crucius and after it was released, the Ironhelm. The lock time on the Thunderhammer was previously, I believe it was 1.25 seconds. It was essentially long enough that without correct positioning, it was very easy for you to take damage. Now, you could typically get a block up beforehand, but now it is centered at 0.6 seconds. That's quite a bit shorter, and it allows you to be much more aggressive with the hammer, and it also allows you to fight those bigger elites without taking a ton of damage. Isn't that handy? Let's demonstrate. See how I was able to get a block up before anything could hit me. So, in a messy melee, it is very easy to get that block time out of your way and not worry. What the lock time is once you hit it, it's similar to how it works for the chain swords and force weapon special attacks, except for you front load all of the damage and you back load all of the cost. So you can't move very much, you can't dodge, you can't do anything for 0.6 seconds. Certainly long enough to cause you trouble if you don't pay attention, so just feel that out, get used to it. To wrap this discussion on lock time up, I will add one little tip. The first 2 actions you can take are block and push. You can then, shortly after, dodge. So there is a bit of a delay in your movement coming back from your other actions. You can also attack slightly before your dodge comes back, but it's such a small difference I don't think I would have noticed had I not been playing this thing so much. Before we leave this section, I just want to talk about the interaction with Chastise the Wicked. Like all weapons on the Zealot, using Chastise the Wicked gives you a lot of extra damage. So we'll just demonstrate that by swinging at a normal mutie to the normal swing without thrust. And then we'll swing at the mutie with Chastise the Wicked, but still without thrust. Just a reminder, we're doing that because thrust is currently broken in patch 9 and does 150% power instead of 20% power over 3 stacks. We'll do the same thing to this Crusher, just so you can understand the value add of Chastise. Okay, 734 just like before. And let's just hit it again. And you can see the big damage you get as a consequence of that Chastise. Final 2 sections here, and I will try to make this brief. For idiosyncrasies, tips, and tricks, we'll be talking on just a couple subjects I haven't already addressed. And then we'll look at weapon pairings, which will not be very long either. There is one niche use case here for the charged attacks on the Ironhelm, and that is to cleave in normal light infantry to get a couple quick kills. And it's actually quite effective, especially with the low lock time on special attacks these days. So if you swing it into Groaners, you'll do this much. Certainly not terrible. And for Poxwalkers, Again, not terrible. You're able to get through 3 or 4 targets without popping off that special damage effect, and you'll kill 2. So that's a great little way to start kicking off your Slaughterer attacks. I've done it for use just because, if you only have like 3 like this, you'll just swing right through them, you'll kill 1, and the other 2 guys will go flying. So you don't have to be as afraid of using the special attack. Just if it's charged up, you can swing it into light targets and it won't be a big deal. The same cannot be said for flak targets. The second flak target hit will take the full discharge, so bear that in mind. When fighting bulwarks, the powered attacks on the Thunderhammer are quite strong. They will stagger the bulwark and send them into a full reeling animation, opening their chest, torso, and head up for swings. Alternatively, you can always bait out their attack, do a dodge, and swing for their body, and that will allow you to kill them in one hit without any stacks of thrust. So the Thunderhammer is really quite good at clearing bulwarks out of the way. The final topic of conversation is on weapon pairings with the Thunderhammer. The Thunderhammer is a great weapon, it's a lot of fun, but it really struggles at horde clear. Sure, you can knock things over and you're basically safe in most fights, but you're definitely not going to be getting rid of those enemies very quickly, and you're going to need something to do that. The obvious choice is to pick up the Flamer, but I'm going to propose a few other options for you so that you have at least some variety to choose from. In my opinion, there are several good choices for weapons that can do at least double duty on horde clear or horde thinning. The other criteria you might select for is dealing with shooter groups and other ranged targets. Since the hammer doesn't have a fabulous mobility, it can be nice to have something to close that gap in your capacities. So I'll be making recommendations based on kind of those 2 criteria. Does it have decent range? And does it have good, at least secondary horde clear, if not primary horde clear? First and most obvious on the list is the Purgation Flamer. It is a fabulous horde clear weapon. Its main drawback is 20 meter range, give or take a little. But if you're good at flanking, you can definitely kill shooters with it and that kind of thing. Next is the ever popular Shredder Auto Pistol with pinning fire. It's a great weapon, a bit short ranged again, but it'll definitely serve well if you need to whip it out quickly with the quick draw time to slap some hordes down to size so you can beat them up with your hammer. The Agrippina MK8 braced autogun is good too, has a nice split between range and close ranged combat, can be sprayed into a horde if you need to thin it out a little bit before you dive all the way in. Keep in mind, you're not always looking to kill the whole horde with your gun, you're just looking to thin it out enough so that it's not going to take you forever to cut through it with your hammer. The last 2 weapons, and my personal favorites, are the Cantrail MK9 combat shotgun and the Lawbringer MK6 combat shotgun. I favor the Lawbringer because it's able to reach out and touch things a little better than the Cantrail, actually quite a bit better than the Cantrail. The Special Shell is efficient at killing Groaners. It's a little bit less good against infested Poxwalkers, but it will do the job okay and then give you the ability to go in with the hammer. The Cantrail, of course, favors the Special Shell with its Candlestick special attack, and it's quite strong in a melee with the high damage, so you can whip it out and blast some special or something at close range, but it suffers at the longer ranges, and that's why I don't like it. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I know this got a little longer than I had intended, but what can I say, I had a little bit of fun with it, and I certainly wanted to cover a few topics. I generally try to make these tutorials with the intent of focusing on the things you might not know about the weapon rather than focusing on some like elite build guide or something like that. You can find that with other people. Here, I can talk to you about how to actually use the thing in a way that makes it fun to use. So that's my topic. Well, I guess I'll just say thank you all for joining me. Thanks for visiting, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.